Melissa Ichiuji. This is the third of our evening art lectures, and I'm incredibly honored and proud to have artist Keith Patterson here tonight. He has a lot of work, as you'll see and you'll hear about. So Keith Patterson is essentially a self-taught artist, originally from Virginia. He started painting when he was 14. He's developed his own style through experimentation. He's also a writer. He's going to tell you about this book of short stories, and he's a musician. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Keith. Thank you all again so much for being here. We'll have time for questions afterwards. Okay? And then you put this on.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for coming out on a cold night and to this beautiful gallery. This is Melissa's gallery. It really is the best space that I've seen in the whole, in the whole region, really. My wife Kelly and I live in Berryville, and we've been there for 12 years, maybe 13, maybe more. Time is marching on. Let's see, I was born in Southern Virginia, Danville, the oldest of 3 children, the oldest grandchild on both sides. And let me tell you, there was a lot of pressure on me from birth, which I've lived up to none of it. It was rather obvious that I couldn't hit a fastball, and wasn't particularly interested in academics. But luckily, there were a lot of doodlers in my family, and so my doodling on everything was accepted, really. My parents bought me drawing paper and watercolor paper and supplied me with materials from the get-go, and I'm eternally grateful for that, because, there was really no other opportunity. I have 2 adult children from my first marriage, and they still talk to me, and that's a beautiful thing. So I don't have a whole lot of grief hanging over my head as I try to bring some beauty into the world. Let me see here. The artist, I said there was a lot of doodlers in my family. That's really my father's side. He was an artist, and he never pursued it really until he got much older and retired. And then, as a watercolorist, he really had some success. They moved back to Danville, and he sold many of his paintings and was in a lot of shows, and has some success. Both of his sisters are wonderful painters, and his mother, who my grandma Dot, she is a wonderful painter, was, and we have some of her work hanging in our little Patterson pub at home. It's really, hey, I know where I come from, and I know where I got my painting. Melissa mentioned that I started painting at 14. Well, that's just that seems like a long time ago. I mean, I'm 65, so yeah, painting at 14, that sounds like a long time ago. But really, I started as I'll show you this. Let me pull this out now. This was a painting that I did as a child that hung in my parents' house, wherever they lived, and I was always a little embarrassed by it because it's kind of crude and it's on, just some brown wrapping paper, and I never really thought much of it. And then Kelly really liked it, and when we were dividing up my parents' estate, this came to us, and it's been hanging in our bedroom for 12, 13 years, and I still never really thought about it. And then, as I was putting together this talk, I was going through my stories. Well, there's a story in my book, the 90% Half True, and the story is about when I was 8 years old, and a Cub Scout, and it was the Cub Scout kite flying contest. And my father took me to the hardware store and bought me 10 feet of brown paper to build 2 kites out of, one for the practice kite and one for the contest. And as, well, a little more information, the kite flying contest had 2 categories. One was the best decorated kite, which I won. It was a spot-on reproduction of the presidential seal. And that was on my kite. I won the best decorated kite. I did not do too well in the actual flying contest. I insisted on running the other way, you know, and I just knew that I was right, you know. But that story's in here. But as I actually read that story and something clicked, I realized that this brown paper that I painted on was actually from that same roll of paper that I made the kites out of when I was 8 years old. So this is actually from I was 8 years old when I painted this. And you know, it kind of reminds me of what I've lost as an artist. Picasso famously said, every child is an artist. The trick is to remain an artist when you grow up. And as I really look at this now, I see that, I mean, there's a boldness, it's very simple, but there's a boldness that's kind of arrogant, that it's like there's no extra anything. I didn't try to fix anything. I just did it. And I look at it now and just go, man, wouldn't I like to retain some of that just youthful arrogance? Edgar Degas said, painting is easy if you don't know how. It's when you know how that it gets difficult. And I find that rather profound. Let me see if I can get back on script here. So, Pablo Picasso and Edgar Degas, 2 of the greatest artists of all times, were also dishing out some pretty heavy philosophy. And it seems like a natural fit. An artist needs a philosophy. The eminent philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "The essence of all great art is gratitude." This really hits home with me. You know, I think gratitude is a wonderful perspective to come at your art from. You know, and I am so grateful to have a chance to be an artist, to have a place to hang and sell my art. I mean, there are many, many wonderful artists who have to lay bricks, feed a family, and you know, I mean, that was me for many, many years. I've always been creative and always been trying to put my art out there, but you know, I mean, I was a house painter and a home improvement guy for, you know, 30, 40 years. In fact, I was crawling on somebody else's roof just 2 years ago at this time, doing an interior 1 year ago at this time. You know, I had to make money. So gratitudes, just being grateful. You know, there's a thing, you've heard of artists' guilt, and it's like, I think of Van Gogh, and I'll get into him in a minute here. The guilt that is involved when you are spending precious time and resources to create what's in your head, and you're not making any money, and you need money. Your family needs money, but you have to create. And there's a certain pathos that it creates, you know, that artist guilt. You know deep in the back of your head that, you know, I mean, there are other things that need to be done, but you have to paint, you have to sculpt, you have to do what is just aching to get out of you. And, you know, artist guilt is something that we have to overcome. You know, what is art? I mean, there's many things. We just, you know, singing, composing, sculpting, painting, acting. These are all arts. There's, you know, in the academic world, a great swath of learning is called arts and sciences. So, I mean, there is a connection between the arts and scientists. You know, some of the most beautiful quotes about art come from scientists. You know, Einstein had some amazing ones, and if I don't just skip over them here, I'll lay a couple of those on you. So, as an artist, we are almost compelled to be a philosopher. Albert Einstein said, "The most beautiful thing we can experience in this life is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science." True art is mysterious. Now, as a painter, I pay more attention to paintings than I do other kinds of arts. When I'm trying to break down how it was done, and a big attraction to me to certain works of art is when I cannot instantly tell how it was done. I like that mystery. And I think back to, this is, I think, Kelly and my first trip to France. We were, you know, in one of the museums, the fantastic museums there, and suddenly I was confronted with one of Van Gogh's big wheat field paintings. And I'm sure you've all seen those. And where the reds, yellows, browns, greens, blacks are all, it's amazing, the movement. And I got drawn in. And I mean, I don't know how much time passed, but I was staring at it, trying to figure out how he did it. And it occurred to me that, you know,
Sam?
Sam, you're an oil painter. Now,
Yeah.
tell me if this is, when you use oil paint, when it's thick, you can, with a palette knife, you can put a coat on, and then you can actually put a second coat of a different color on
It's
top.
to be gentle.
It being very gentle. And so I'm looking at this Van Gogh, and I'm thinking, okay, he actually put a coat of yellow, and then a coat of red, and then a coat of black, then a coat of green, and then took the edge of a palette knife or a stick and began scraping at different depths to reveal different colors in concert with each other. And I mean, it was almost like hallucinating. I was imagining just how deeply into the process he was. I mean, real deep. And, you know, I'm blown away to this day. We all enjoy getting into a good artistic trance, but I mean, there's a price to be paid. And as I've got the quote, I'm gonna have to find the quote and I'll skip over it when I get there, but like Van Gogh said, he goes, I gave my soul to my art and it cost me my mind. And man, I've got some physical issues. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I've got among other things, I've got to take care of myself. Well, when my wife back when she was working full time, you know, I'd be alone at the house some days for 10 hours or so, and I wouldn't take care of myself. I would be so into a painting that wouldn't look up for 10 hours. I wouldn't drink, I wouldn't eat. And then Kelly would get home and go, dude, you need to look in the mirror. You know, you look like a ghost. And, you know, I mean, I know where that comes from. That is getting lost in it. And there is a price to be paid. I believe this was still our first trip to Paris when I had that revelation about his painting. We traveled to Normandy, to Auvers-sur-Oise, where Van Gogh lived when he died. And we went to this tiny museum that's built, it's like just a little 2-story, 4-room building. And upstairs is the room where he died, and nobody has ever slept there ever since he died. And, I was a big fan, but I wasn't expecting what happened. As we were climbing the steps to go up to the room, I was in the lead, and I began to feel it. And it was the artist's guilt. And, Van Gogh allegedly sold one painting during his life. And I think that was kind of a gimme, like just a woman friend of his brother's. And I don't think she even picked it up, so it's just a sad thing. He never he never made any money. And he was dependent on his brother Tio for all of his supplies and all of his the money that he used for rent and food all came from his brother. And then his brother, at a certain point, got married. His wife got pregnant, and Tio wrote Vincent a letter that said, I can't support you anymore. And Van Gogh was dead within a month. And as we were climbing the stairs, I began to feel that guilt. It was as if his spirit was there, and it's just that the guilt of having to create and really not being able to justify it. One of the greatest artists of all time. You think it's silly to think he would have to justify it, but it was a terrible pain for him. And as when I crossed the threshold into his room, I burst into tears and cried. I'm going to do it again. I cried uncontrollably for 20 minutes, and I've got a witness. I couldn't stop. And, he's my favorite artist, but I didn't know I felt like that. That was a bit of a transformative experience. Now, contrast Van Gogh's just the sadness that his life was about. Next we went to Giverny, where Claude Monet lived, and had his, that's when you see the pictures of his water lily ponds and his gardens. That's the place. And that is a place of absolute light and laughter and love. Monet actually, he was successful. He sold art. He was able to hire a stable of gardeners. He really made it. And, the contrast between the two places is, I won't say it haunts me to this day, but it's never far from my thoughts, just how different an artist's life can be. When Kelly and I got together 13 years ago, I was really struggling. I was in between marriages, had no health insurance, had survived a couple of heart attacks, type 1 diabetic, really struggling. But I had a lot of energy. I was turning a commercial space. I was working, as a contractor, and I had turned a commercial space into my own art gallery, and this is in Arlington. Meanwhile, I'm playing in 2 bands and writing a novel. And Kelly said, "Dude, you need to just choose one thing, and I'll get behind you." And I had to ask her, which thing? I mean, I didn't know. Really did. Yeah, as I can tell, there's some people experience the same thing. And she said, I think you're actually closest to making a nickel as a painter. And I was like, and you'll get behind me? She said, sure. So, man, that's all it took. And I really launched into the painting. And when I moved out to Clark County to live with Kelly, man, I hit the streets. I'm a people person. And I knocked on everybody's door in 3 counties, trying to get my paintings, in to be seen and heard. And things began to develop. I, got into it's now defunct, the Firehouse Gallery in Berryville. Sold a big painting, for a lot of money. And then it was like, let's do this, And it takes a little luck too. I wouldn't be here now if the luminary Robert Ballard hadn't spoken up and suggested to Melissa that, she needs to see some of my work. So it's a little, but hey, it's luck, but also it's like, hey, I really followed Robert and, became a friend of his. And so it wasn't just a complete accident, You gotta make friends, you gotta knock on doors. It's like Sam was asking me here a while back, well, what are the steps to get to where you're at? I'm like, dude, you're doing it. You're in this gallery. You're engaging people. You're showing up, and and that's what it takes. Not that I am satisfied with where I'm at, but in a way I am. It's do you really want to be so famous? Like we saw a movie last week about Bob Dylan. Anybody seen that movie?
Yeah. It was good.
Fantastic. And when he finally got famous and suddenly you can't go anywhere and people are punching you in the face, and it's like, do you really want to be that famous? It's like I'm kind of content to be here right now, speaking to 20 people and being in this beautiful gallery. Let me catch up again. Creativity takes courage. That's Henry Matisse. Matisse is another luminary that's enshrined on my personal Mount Rushmore of artists. And it wasn't always thus. I mean, I've always appreciated his paintings, but I had only been, I'd only ever seen them before going to the galleries in France. I'd only ever seen them in books, and they're this big, little pictures of his paintings. And while they're beautiful, I mean, there's nothing like seeing a real live Matisse in person. And it's sort of, this is another moment that I'll always remember. I mean, it's sort of like the ground shook when you see, they're big, some of them are really big, and the colors, it's like, wow, just the colors and the combinations is just brilliant and overwhelming. And I, at this stage in my growth, I really you know, I don't want to say I'm going to copy a Matisse, but I mean, that's a part of the sensibility that, that I admire most. I'm not sure who said this, but a critic said that Picasso is the greater artist, Matisse the greater painter. And you know, that's, I don't want to argue for either, but you know, that, I mean, when you see a Matisse in person, you know, it's hard to argue that, I mean, you know, he's just one of the greatest painters to ever slap it on the canvas. Yes, back to the quote by Picasso. You know, the problem with every child artist is how to remain an artist when you grow up. And as long as I can remember, I have been an artist. In fact, family lore holds that when I was 3 and my first cousin was 4, we, at a family get-together, we got into the garage, opened a can of paint, and painted my uncle's Oldsmobile from the door panels down completely. Tires, everything. We had a couple of brushes, and we painted that Oldsmobile. And you know, I can't really remember if I got a hiding or not, but that story lived on. And I've painted several more cars. I worked for a painting company, house painting company, Eagle Painting. And one of my jobs was to keep the fleet of vans in repair, pulling dents, patching and painting. And we painted with house paint. I mean, you know, good old oil-based house paint, spraying those things out. It seems pretty comical now. But I learned a lot about paints that has translated to my art career. Because I use predominantly house paints. It's because I'm a house painter. I had house paint, so I started painting with house paint. Yes.
Is it cheaper that way?
It is, and in fact, I still what I do. I'll get into my little thing I want to talk about. I'll tell you about it. You know, I use I use artist paint as well in tubes, but at least with water base, the artist paint you see is translucent. If you mix it with a little water, you can make a wash that light will come right through. House paint is opaque, and if you want to actually cover something, it's much more effective. You know, artist paint doesn't really cover unless you blob it on. So if you want to thin it out, it's not going to cover. So, you know, knowing your medium, I can get coverage. I would, you know, looking at like these paintings here, I would say are 100% house paint. I don't even know if there's any exceptions. No. Excuse me, all house paint. There's a thing called the hierarchy of finishes. Have any of you heard of that? And that's where that plays out, where you have heard, maybe not that way, but where it plays out that you've seen the results of abusing the hierarchy of finishes is like in this place. There was probably oil-based paint on all the trim, if it's old trim. You know, a lot of most old buildings before and houses before 1970, there was oil-based on the trim. Well, when you know, paint manufacturers started making good latex acrylic semi-glosses and glosses, well, suddenly everybody was repainting their oil-based trim with water-based acrylics. Well, they'll cover, but where the rubber meets the road is if there's any stress, like if you hit that trim, if you tap it with a hammer, or your boot, the latex layer will just crack right off of the oil because it doesn't bond. The molecules are a different size and will not bond with it. If you introduce heat or cold or moisture, the outer layer won't hold up. So that's where the hierarchy of finishes. That's when I first learned of that. Now, as an artistic painter, I had to learn it all over again. So, well, it's obvious you can't go over oil with latex, but even among latex paints, you see the way I work, I add lots of layers. So, like with this painting, it started off with that blue, everything was blue, okay? And then I began to splatter the green. And what I do, I call it working wet. I like to, like that blue, once it begins to set up, not when it's soaking wet, but once it sets up and gets tacky, I water the painting. I paint on the floor. Everything's on the floor. So I water it with my watering can. And then I put on the next layer. And it sort of spreads out a little bit and has a soft feel. But what happens? See, I buy a lot of mist paints. And that's the way it is cheap. I buy gallons of mist tints for $5 or whatever. But
What is mist tint?
mist tint means somebody didn't want it, so they go, "This isn't the color I wanted," and they give it back to like Lowe's or Home Depot. They usually have a mist tint section where you can, buy different paints. Well, I began working with, flat, satin, semi-gloss. I would buy all of them if they were water-based. But then what would happen? If, let's say I put a layer of satin down, which has a little bit more of a gloss than a flat, and I do my technique where I let it get tacky, then I water it. Then if I put flat on top of it, what happened to me one time is I'm watching as the flat begins to separate and disintegrate and just make a complete mess. And I'm like, what did I do? And Kelly is, has left in the morning many times and comes back and I've ruined another painting. And I finally figured out what it was. I have to use the exact same finish. So it just so happens that like the Ace Hardware in our neighborhood, they sell samples, in little 5-6 ounce, containers. All of the samples are satin, acrylic satin. So I began using exclusively acrylic satin, and I've never had a problem since. It's like the molecules are all the same size, and they will, even with some moisture in between, they will bond together and behave, and I can anticipate what's going to happen. And so the hierarchy of finishes, is even really important, just even among all water-based paints, when you're working like I do. So I work exclusively with interior satin. Even if I go to Lowe's and look for the mist tints, I only buy the interior satin. A little trick there. Okay. Processes and techniques. I think I just got into most of that. Also, well, I guess while we're on this, I have two, with all the paint being the same. My use of interior satin, that's all I use. The difference between this painting and this painting, you can see this is a much softer look. This is a little brighter. What's happening here? See, this is a canvas that was actually, I'm wrong, but this canvas was prime. I was going to say this is a canvas I bought at Hobby Lobby, but it's not. This is one that I stretched myself. But this one, I just know from remember doing it. This one actually, the primer, my base coat actually dried completely. So the subsequent layers lay on top instead of soaking in and softening. So that's why this one is brighter than this one. I was going for this effect, the soft effect, and this is an example of one that I kept watering and kept it moist the whole time I was painting, and I probably did that in one 10-hour session, where I sort of got into the trance and just kept it going, and then let it dry, and that's the effect I was looking for. This is a different look, which I don't mind it, but it's almost like, I think if I'd have had my druthers, I would have kept this wet and gone for a softer feel. I still really like that painting. Inspirations for subject matter. There's a good quote here. Art is either plagiarism or revolution. And that's Paul Gauguin. There's nothing new under the sun. Here's an Einstein quote. Imagination is more important than knowledge. And here's a good one. Igor Stravinsky. Lesser artists borrow, great artists steal. There are only 8 notes from which all modern music is composed. You're going to have to repeat some. There's only 3 primary colors from which every hue is constructed from 3 primary colors. The English language only has 23 letters. And we use these to describe the whole of the universe and every emotion within it. So whether you were a visual artist, a composer, writer, actor, sculptor, ceramicist, musician, you have to borrow. Begging and stealing are more of an option, but borrowing is a given. There's nothing inherently new about painting a landscape, or a water scene, or a still life, or a nude. They've all been done before. So where is there any room for creativity or space for originality? This leads to another Edgar Degas quote. Art is not what you see, but what you make others see. Gertrude Stein. A writer should write with his eyes, and a painter should paint with his ears. And here's maybe my favorite. This is another Picasso, who was just a brilliant philosopher. Amazing. Some painters transform the sun into a yellow spot. Others transform a yellow spot into the sun. I had to chew on that for a minute. I draw much of my artistic inspiration from the beauty of the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Shenandoah Valley and the river and, you know, everything that surrounds it. You know, the mountains and the valleys and the river, they're as eternal as anything in our world, but they're ever changing and daily. And that juxtaposition, you know, that juxtaposition, you know, is something that touches me every day. It's the same sort of juxtaposition of, Kelly gave me this, you know, words for what I learn and what I know I can do. My schooling, self-taught schooling as a painter becomes my Mary Poppins bag. These are the things that I can pull out and do with confidence, like learning about the hierarchy of finishes and not making those mistakes, learning how to mix colors, all this, you know, the Mary Poppins bag stuff has to be balanced by the childhood innocence. You know, like Picasso has said in many different quotes, it's about, you know, trying to stay in touch with that inner child. You have to, you know, you have to be a working man, but you're still trying to be a child. This leads to something I want to say about abstract painting. Now, I've done plenty of abstracts, and people who are not painters and not abstract painters say, oh, that's easy. You know, it's like a child can do that. But I mean, abstracts are hard. And it's kind of like, you know, going up on the high dive and trying not to touch the railings, you know. I mean, it's difficult. And because as soon as you commit to doing an abstract, well, you've already lost part of the mystery because you made a decision. An abstract to me is almost accidental. It's like the wind blows the window open and you back up and kick over a bucket of paint on a canvas and you go, it looks like a duck, you know, and you know, or it looks pretty cool, or it's a beginning of something. And it's like, to me, that accidental aspect is like I mean, that's what I call true inspiration, or, you know, just a blessing of creative spark. You know, and it's so hard to try to create that. I had a client of mine, a collector, who owns several of my pieces. She showed up one day a couple years ago and said, I'm looking for an abstract for my dining room. And I'm having a party. And it's you know, I know what I want. And, you know, at any given time, I've got, you know, maybe 50 or 60 paintings on the floor that have never been stretched yet. They're just waiting for their next act. And I showed her everything. I've got 20 paintings in our little home gallery and whatever. I showed her about 80 paintings, you know, 10 abstracts. And she wasn't really sure. And then all of a sudden she looked over at the wall where I had a piece of heavy plywood that I'd used as my art table for many years. And it was just caked with random paint. It actually had a pair of scissors that were stuck to it, and a couple of brushes, and just all sorts of stuff. And it was my old table. And that's it, will you sell it to me? So I mean, I sold my old table to her for $500, and she hung it in her gorgeous house in the dining room.
Wow.
Yeah. And as I look at it, that was maybe the only true abstract I've ever done. Because, you know, the rest of them were not accidents. You know, they were all born from my conscious mind. Here's another Picasso quote. Art is a lie that makes us realize the truth. Here's one from James McNeill Whistler. An artist is not paid for his labor, but for his vision. Many times I've been asked by prospective buyers when they see my prices, they go, well, how long did it take you to paint it? And I'm sure if you, I mean, many of you, if you're an artist, have heard the same thing. And it's it's a little bit insulting, I mean, it's like, well, you painted it in one day, why is it $3,000, So the answer to the question, how long did it take you to paint it, is all my life, I don't have a formal education in art or degree, but I've intensely studied all those that have come before me that I have access to. And my wife Kelly has been just absolutely instrumental in my education. We have toured, not the world, but we've been to wonderful galleries in Europe and in the United States, and I've had the opportunity to really witness and examine and learn, and I've been trying for, I've been painting all my life, but it's really been serious I've been pretty much obsessed with it for the last 13 years. And, I do have an education. I have a self-taught education that I feel pretty confident in. I really feel like I know what I want to do. And even though I admire other artists' work, like Olga and Sam, I love you guys' stuff. But and what it reminds me, you're both of you, it's emotional, to me it's emotional painting. And, I think of Picasso's Titanic painting, Guernica.
I love that painting.
Where he's painting a scene of war. And, it's just so intense. And and it's intense and it's awe-inspiring, but it's like, do I want to do that? It's like, I do in a way. I want to like make a statement, but I don't know. Is it afraid? I don't know if it's afraid. I am in a little bit of a comfort. I like selling my paintings, and I've got a little niche with just trying to do pretty things. The local landscapes. Flowers, water, trees, there's so much to learn and perfect just within that narrow range of subject matter that I feel like I could paint the rest of my life, at least another 7 years. But paint, just trying to master that subject matter. And I'm not sure what age I'm going to have to be before I start painting emotional nudes. That's my wife just winced, but that might be somewhere off in the future. I've got a lot of work to do before I get there. Let's see. A last thought just about formal education.
We've done that.
Oh, wow. Rolling on here. I am at the end of my thing here. Even the luminaries that I admire the most, Picasso, Van Gogh, Matisse, and Jackson Pollock as well, they all learned to paint traditional realism first. And they, you know, I mean, Picasso, when he was 12 years old, could draw like Rubens or one of the great masters. And then he took off into the stratosphere. But he learned to do that first, as all of these greats did. You have to, oh, here's a great quote. This is Winston Churchill. Without tradition, art is a flock of sheep without a shepherd. Without innovation, it is a corpse. So, the artists are philosophers, the statesmen are philosophers, the scientists are philosophers. So I get to be a philosopher too. And in fact, I didn't write this down. I had this thought. I told it to Kelly a couple days ago, and then I forgot it. It just came back to me right now. But to be able to, I saw it was a sunset from our TV room. I'm looking at the sunset, and it went dark orange to light orange to yellow, and then to light blue, and then to dark blue. But I'm looking at the transition from yellow to blue, and I'm thinking, who but God can transition from yellow to blue without green? How do you do that? So there's always room for some work. And I might set my sights right there. I'm anxious to get home and see if I can transition from yellow to blue without getting any green. And I think I'm going to wrap it up right there, talking about the arts. Real quick, Kelly told me to choose one thing, and I did. But the music and the writing never go away completely. So I've always written short stories, and Kelly finally said, let's publish a collection, and we did. So this is 19 stories, and they're all pretty much just nothing's R-rated. It's all your kids can read it or whatever. But these are all based on real stories, with just slight little twists to make them readable. It's called 90% Half True. And I've got a few, if anybody wants one, $20. They're available on Amazon. It's an amazing thing. Amazon. We've also got, this is the 2025 calendar, and $20. And it's got, 12, some of them are actually right here in the studio. Like this painting here is over on the wall. This one's somewhere. And
It's up on the second level.
on the second level. So, some of these paintings are right here. Got some calendars. I'm going to leave some of these with Melissa. And, where the creativity will go. Karma in the can.
What?
Karma in the can. Have any of you, back in your youth, do you remember the pet rock?
Yeah.
Well, I had the bright idea to try to create the next pet rock. The ideal gift, karma in a can. You give it, and it'll come back to you. So I actually talked an investor into giving me $20,000. And before I had sold one can, I made 15,000 cans. There was 6 different kinds. And I said, they all had scrolls. There were 6 different scrolls. This is the sports karma. It's a story about what you do comes back to you. Anyway, you talked about an albatross around my neck. We sold about 5,000 cans, and then I've dragged 10,000 cans around with me for 10 years. And I've been giving them away ever since. I'm down to the final box of Karma. These are giveaways. You buy a painting, you get a can of Karma. Anyway, the different places your creativity might take you. I might say, yeah, just let it roll. But then on the other hand, it's like, man, if you have a niche and you're making sales, don't get goofy. Just do what you do. Hey, I want to thank you all for coming out in the cold. And Melissa, thank you so much for having me. And Doug, I'm really honored to be associated with this place. And, thanks again and Happy New Year, you guys. Oh, if we can hang out a little bit more, if anybody's got any questions, I'd be glad to.
Absolutely. Anybody have questions? I actually have one. Could I start it off?
Sure.
I was thinking about your paintings, and you said, I like to make pretty paintings. And my question to you is, how do you manage, I see a kind of constraint in your work. How do you manage to not flip over to the sentimental or the overworked or the trite? Like, you have found this balance where it doesn't flip over into that. And is that a conscious decision? Do you just know instinctually when to stop?
That's a good question. And you've seen some of my trite paintings as well. I mean, I would say trite, my Van Gogh, the one where he's hanging on the wall with the semi-nude. I mean, I don't know if you call that trite, but that's not my typical subject matter. And to answer the question, I would say that I make plenty of mistakes, and it's in the curating. It's like, no, I have a basement full of mistakes, but it's in the curation. It's like these stretch bar kits are expensive, so I have lots of paintings and I stretch them after they're done, all of them. So I curate my paintings and decide which ones I want to invest the time and the money to actually bring them to fruition. I mean, the stretch bar kits are $70, $100 each. I mean, I've got to make I can't waste $100. I'm not that, wealthy. So, yeah.
So the question is, they almost are verging on abstract.
Well, I use abstract techniques as much as I can. Like this one here is a good example of everything that you see from here down is thrown or splattered. And I consciously try to do that because I don't like seeing my own brush strokes. It's like too obvious. And the subject matter that is available there's a certain kind of subject matter that I can do with that, and it's landscapes and flowers. I've done some other things. We have a big painting that's in the gallery at home. It's the horse and rider. It's actually a rider on horse. They might make it here. It's a rider on horseback, and it is absolutely abstract technique. There's not one brush stroke on it, and so that's a good example of a figurative painting that still holds to the abstract technique. And that's something that I try to do, is use as much abstract technique as possible, even if it's a representative painting.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you did brush strokes on this one, right? On the one at the end?
This one, yes.
Because you had to for the flowers.
Yeah, the blue flowers are all brush stroked. And
How'd you do this one?
There's a lot. What happened? This
How'd you do this one right here? That's not splattered at all, is it?
This one has a lot of splatter, like all these. Yeah, there's a lot of
But
splatter.
everything at the bottom is not?
These are brush. There's still a lot of splatter if you look close.
Oh,
A
okay.
lot of the smaller aspects are splattered. Yeah, yes.
My question is, when you gave up your, playing music, how did that, where did that energy go, and how did it shape your paintings? You have this musical energy that has to be part of your vision, whether you know it or not. And did you notice that in your paintings? Because you seem lyrical.
Thank you.
Music.
Music's still a part of my life. In fact, I have my yearly gig in Berryville at the gazebo. I'm a part of the Music in the Park series, so I'll be playing there again this year. And where that goes is I don't commit to, I don't practice with a band every week and that kind of thing. I use that time to work on painting.
Sure.
But I got 4 guitars. I think I got 5 guitars now. I just bought one last week.
But did you notice how it fitted? When you took that energy and moved it into painting, was there any I'm just wondering.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Metaphorically,
That's a very good question, but I haven't really thought about it. I mean, I still, it's like if I am while the paint. I mean, I'm blessed. While I have to let the paint dry and set up at certain points. Well, when that's happening, I go pick up my guitar. And all my guitars have paint all over them. Because I just go.
Yeah.
A lot of paint clothes. Nice, thank you for that question. The creative energy, I call it having the curse. I've always been an artist, a writer, and a musician. And if I am waiting for something to dry, or if I lose my train of thought, or I just go from one to the other. I do most of my painting outside. I have a beautiful setup in the driveway and with a pergola over me. And so 9-10 months a year I'm outside. And but when it gets too cold to paint outside, I write. I mean, it's a natural sort of progression with me. And I've got a story I'm dying to get back to.
That's great.
Here in the midst of winter. Well, of course, while I keep a painting going inside, like I was telling Sam, man, I can't wait to get back to this painting that I've, got my eye on. I know what I want to do. Just have to get in there and do it. Yes.
I'm going back to what you said earlier about, I wonder if you'll ever get to the emotional paintings. And so I love your art because it's calming and soothing and happy, and underlying happy, not above board happy. So I'm just wondering, while you're painting, if you've ever had a moment where this really deep emotion comes rushing through and wants you to stop something serene and go over here and give it some energy for later. We can get back to it.
I'm thinking, and I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but there have been a couple of paintings that I've done that have made me cry. And, and I didn't see it coming. I wasn't trying to make myself cry. It was just like, it comes from a place of gratitude. And, like I was talking about earlier, I'm not sure if it's being conscious of putting some different energy into it, but quite often, I will look at a painting the next day and go, well, it needs this or it needs that, and I continue. It's rare, but it happens where I go through my process. Well, here you go. Process and inspiration. It's like two completely divergent things that you have to marry. And the process saves me from demanding inspiration. And there was a painting that was on the back wall that sold, a big landscape. And that one I can look at it, and that's one that was pure process. I didn't know where that one was going to go, and I created it all in one day doing my process with the wet canvas, and it went perfectly. And I got to a certain place, I did exactly what I was going to do, and I went, wow, it's actually beautiful too. And so it's like, it's you know, that doesn't happen too often, where just pure process yields the fruit, you know. But it does occasionally, and to me, that's what I look at as one of my special children, you know. Nice question, thank you. Yes, sir.
So, I always find like my favorite paintings are the ones I paint in one night. Like the ones that are just the flow the whole time. Do you feel that way?
Absolutely.
Because you were just saying about the
Yeah.
painting fast. I just find that like the ones you're up till like dawn, like in the morning and like 8 o'clock in the morning. Do you ever stay up all night or anything?
Not anymore, my friend.
That's what I do all the time.
In fact, for New Year's Eve, we had a Paris New Year's, which means we did our toast at 8 o'clock. Because it was midnight in Paris, 8 o'clock here.
Okay.
Yeah, man. But no, my time is during the day. But man, I bounce out of bed at 6:30, and you know, and you know, I mean, we have animals that get us up, you know, early, and then I just keep going. You know, I get most of my work I get done between say 8 and 1 p.m. and that's when I have to go get something to eat. You know, I like to before then I fast and I paint. You know, if I don't have to go somewhere.
You drink coffee and stuff?
I do.
Yeah, do you drink lots of coffee?
I do.
Good job.
Yeah.
And water, I hope.
Yeah, gotta remember the water. Yes.
Yeah.
This is just a curiosity. As a 3-year-old, when you painted the car, what color did you use? Do you remember?
You know, I think it was like the porch paint that they had painted the floor of the garage with. It's like gray, and you know, I don't really remember, but you know, it's gray sort of comes to mind. I won't claim we did a good job.
Any more questions? All right, thank you so much. Calendars, books, support the artist. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. You are really tall, aren't you?
Yeah, I see it till like 8 in the morning. I get up like 3 in the afternoon and I stay up till 8 in the morning.